There we go. Now we're live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Attorney Post. We are bringing it back. This was a long-standing podcast for a good long while. We went on a hiatus. We kind of got into a fight with Google, and we lost. But we are bringing it back, and we are bigger than ever, and bigger than YouTube. And I'm really excited today. I've actually got with me Michael Palumbo. Michael practices law. He specializes in New York City traffic tickets. It's a very, very big specialization. We're going to get there in a little bit. We're going to talk about why you need an attorney to fight traffic tickets. We're going to talk about how he got into this, what led him to this particular facet of the law, and he's got some really interesting stories to tell, including the fastest speeder I think he ever helped. So we'll get there in a minute. So if you want to understand how traffic laws work, if you want to understand, what to do when you get pulled over, maybe the best ways to prevent points going on your license and keep your insurance down, this is going to be one of those calls that you want to be on. So we're going to begin in just a minute, but first we're going to do a quick word from one of our sponsors. Our first sponsor is injuryattorneyleads.com. Injuryattorneyleads.com. Personal injury attorneys spend a lot of time and money on advertising, but it's difficult to get qualified leads. You are paying for leads that are not qualified, or worse, you're getting leads from the internet that are no longer interested in even talking to a lawyer. That's if you can even get a hold of him. These leads can average between $99 a lead on the low end and $400 a lead on the high end, and you can burn through 5 to 10 just to get one serious prospective client on the phone. The solution is injuryattorneyleads.com. Injuryattorneyleads.com will live transfer people directly to your firm who have been in an accident and who want to talk to a lawyer about their case. You can be sure that these potential clients will meet your criteria for a qualified lead, and close rates average about 60%. Set up a time to talk with a client generation specialist by visiting injuryattorneyleads.com and scheduling a time to talk. That's injuryattorneyleads.com. All right, so today our talk again is fighting New York City traffic tickets, tips, tricks, and secrets with Michael Palumbo. He's going to reveal everything you need to know about working with a traffic ticket lawyer, etc. And again, this is Justin West. I am going to be your host today. So, Michael, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Justin, hi. Thanks. Today I'm doing better than I deserve.
Aren't we all, though? Aren't we all?
Thanks for having me on. It's you do great service by interviewing different lawyers from around the country in different practice areas. And because you know what, hopefully a lot of people will see this, and not just my podcast, but all the podcasts you do, because when you need a lawyer for anything, you really have one shot to get it right, and that's what I tell people.
Yeah.
And unlike other areas of things that you may not have a direct knowledge of, like let's say, your kid plays football in high school, so you're gonna have that's a point of interest, right?
Yeah.
No one goes around talking about at dinner time the rule against perpetuities and different nuances between a personal injury case in New York versus New Jersey. You just don't do it. So people aren't really well versed in law, and who would be? They're generally boring topics. So to just to know that people see your podcast, not just mine, to know that there are nuances between states and between lawyers. It's really good information you put out. And I do want to correct you on one thing. I'm not just a New York City traffic ticket defense lawyer.
Fair enough.
I'm a New York State, including New York City.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
30% of my business is in New York City because they write over 1 million tickets a year. But I cover the entire state of New York, New York, Connecticut, and Vermont. I'm licensed in those 3 states, and my law office covers the entire state. I don't limit myself to a geographical area. So
awesome. Yeah, I'm so used to speaking of New York City, so it just kind of came out on autopilot. I even have it written down, just New York, but it's one of those automatic brain farts.
But there is a huge difference between a New York City traffic ticket and a ticket written outside of New York City. You may as well be in a separate state, as a matter of fact, the way it works. And I don't know if you want, I can explain it now, or if you have some questions you want to ask, we could circle back to it. But there is a nuance.
Let's circle back to that. But I'm actually going to write that down and make sure I ask you about that, because I do want to know the difference. So we'll just say the difference between city and state tickets.
Yeah.
So let's not forget to talk about that. But let's start with the more general stuff. Let's just let people have maybe a 5-minute introduction to you. Tell me a little bit more about your law firm. How long have you been practicing law? Where did you go to school? Give us the basic 411 on your law firm there, Michael.
Well, I went to Pace University School of Law in Westchester County, New York, and as they say, best law school in the county. Okay, for those that don't know, it's the
competition
only law school in Westchester County in the state of New York. That's law school in the county. I went there, and prior to that, I was a police officer, and I actually went to law school at night. So, I tell people I've been handing them out or defending them since 1992. But it wasn't necessarily a direct intent to become a traffic ticket defense lawyer um, because I was a police officer. It actually, and this is something maybe there's some law students out there and people that think about going to law school. This is actually pretty common. You go to law school, and if you have some experience in something else, that's where you'll end up. Like, for example, if someone is in the construction trades, a friend of mine, an owner in a construction company. Um, he went to law school with me, and he does construction contract law. He does construction tort. So, a lot of people do end up to have a background in something, practicing law in what they had a background and it had nothing to do with law. But what happened with me is I actually went to law school primarily because I do enjoy the law, and when I was in the police academy, there's a lot of academic studying you do, and I really I enjoyed it. And so when I really wanted to, I figured I didn't really want to stay as 20 years as a cop after I got there and had interest in the law, so I went to law school. But the intent was to go out on my own, and which I am. I started out doing insurance defense. I represented people in personal injury cases, who were insured by the companies I work for. I also did contract work, which is unique. I did contract litigation representing the insurance company directly. So I did two areas of litigation. One was tort and one was contract. One was representing third parties in tort. One was representing my employer in contract disputes. So I learned a lot. I spent 4 or 5 years in insurance defense, and I learned a lot about litigation. I did a bunch of appeals. I did like 15 appeals, which is kind of rare for a trial lawyer to have so many appeals. So I really got a really good background. But prior to leaving the insurance company, I really hooked up with a bunch of my friends who went to law school. One guy did a lot of land use law. I did work for him to learn that. Another guy did matrimonials. I worked for him, on the side doing matrimonial work. I learned some employment law. I learned probate. I had a really broad based of knowledge. I also went and took assignments from the local courts on criminal cases. And so when I stepped out of the law firms, I really I was more of a generalist at that time, and I started doing advertising. And really, what happened was probably a function of the volume of traffic ticket cases out there. It wasn't really anything, but my phone was ringing mostly for the traffic ticket matters and the low level criminal stuff versus matrimonial. So of course, just as human nature is the more business I'm getting in a certain particular practice area, as I'm spending my advertising money, the more I'm putting into it. And as a few years went on, what I realized in dealing with people and people having these nuanced issues. I'm a truck driver and I can't have CSA points. So I'm like, well, what does CSA mean? And so I would research the Federal Motor Carriers Administration, the overlap with CDLs. Someone would call you up and say, well, I have all these other traffic tickets. Well, you could be suspended. And then I'm doing research, realize, no, they cannot just be suspended. They could be revoked. And I realized that people needed the specialty. And there were not a lot of lawyers that understood it. And I got a call for a fatality hearing at one point. And because of my investigative background, I realized that there was more information out there. And I represent this person, and I put together a really good package. And no one was really doing fatality. There are a lot of lawyers that do it, but these fatality hearings happen at the DMV. So I even branched off into doing DMV stuff. And just as time went on, I realized there's a void in the market that I'm filling here, and that people need. I was just building a name for it, and I just slowly stopped taking on other cases. So I had like a probate matter, and I wrapped that up, and I didn't take any more on. And so family court matters I had, and I sort of just, I realized there was a void in the market. And I also realized that there's a benefit to specializing. And I tell people, whenever you hire a lawyer for anything, get a lawyer that specializes in what you need. That's always the best lawyer to have, because their reputation resides in that practice area. They take it very serious. You're always going to be their most important client. You don't want to be the client who is in a practice area where the lawyer does 10% of his business there and 90% in something else. It's not his reputation, it's not his bread and butter. So there was a value to being a specialist, and there was definitely a value to filling a void. And that's how I ended up subspecializing my law practice, not just from criminal defense, which I will still do. I'll do the ticketable offenses only that are more akin to a traffic ticket matter. But really culling it down to a traffic ticket lawyer and also understanding the underlying administrative issues that and representing people before the DMV in specialized applications and specialized proceedings.
Okay. That's fascinating. And so like you've just always had like a desire to work inside the law, it sounds like, which is amazing. And you've been on multiple aspects, multiple sides of law at the same time, which is also pretty crazy. So let's go practical for just a minute, because this is something I know people have a lot of questions about. And since you've been a police officer, well, first off, I actually had 3 people ask me this question to ask you. So dispel a rumor or confirm it. Do police officers have quotas? Do they have to give out a certain number of tickets?
Um, yes and no. Um, my experience, my direct experience, and my experience in knowing other police officers in other police departments. Let's put it this way: you're a police supervisor, you're a sergeant, you're a lieutenant or a captain or whatever, and you patrolled in those streets yourself, right? You know the streets, you know the town that you patrolled in, and you know that there's people that are speeding, committing minor traffic infractions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know it's out there. So if a guy comes in with absolutely no self-initiated field activity, hasn't pulled over really anybody, you just know he's not really putting any effort in other than going on calls. So is there a quota? No, but it's just common sense for a police administration to know, because these people, I mean, yes, police chiefs do come from one jurisdiction or another, but the vast majority of police supervisors start out in their police department,
Mm-hmm.
and they know all the hiding spots, and they know who's lazy and who's not. So is there a direct quota? No, but if you're not within the norms of what everyone else is doing, you're going to stand out. And by the way, it's actually the same on the other side. Most police administrations, of course, no one wants to, everyone wants a police, they don't want their cops to be lazy, but they don't want them to be overzealous either. Why are you, you know, you know, just making all these minor arrests, to a greater degree than somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
You're not showing any discretion. You're not cutting the population any break. You're trying to make a search every single time. You're trying to find a reason to search the vehicle. They kind of don't like that either.
Yeah.
They don't like, so it's not really a quota so much, but it is, you can measure a police officer's effectiveness, or I should say, his field
Whether
activity,
they're doing their
in the
job.
amount of tickets he writes. And if someone's not writing, within a range, whatever, in the same area, what other cops are writing, it is an indicator that that cop is not really earning his money. And so is it a quota? No, but if you're smart, you're going to write a couple tickets.
Yeah.
You're going to be aggressive, and when a situation calls for it, and I don't mean physically aggressive, you're just going to you're going to be digging more in search situations. And do you really want to be like, I pulled over a kid one night. It was his prom night, and it was a pretty excessive speed. Do I really want to give this kid a major ticket, or tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you don't just, it really, it's an indicator of right, it's an indicator of good judgment, staying within some quantum of norms and doing what you're doing, some self-initiated field activity. Wouldn't
Gotcha.
exactly call it a quota.
Okay. No, people ask me that question all the time, and I've heard a few different takes, but actually that probably makes the most sense. I mean, if you look like you're just kind of sitting there reading a book and not actually ticketing people, then you're probably sitting there reading a book and not ticketing people, and they're going to expect you to step up your game a little bit and actually do your job. But you don't want to be a you don't want to be a Nazi about it, if I can
Well,
use that word on YouTube.
okay, well, here's another thing, right? You got in New York City has the highway department, the highway police
Hmm.
officers. That's their jobs to do traffic enforcement. Most police departments have a motorcycle unit. The motorcycle unit is the traffic enforcers. They got to be writing tickets all day long. That's what they're supposed to do. What they're supposed to
Right.
do is, you know, there's you get complaints from the citizens. People are speeding on my street. You have traffic reports. You take you take your accident report, indicate of statistics. This is all done by a supervisor of the unit. It may be in conjunction with town hall, and you identify the areas where there's more dangerous driving going on. Now, of course, those cops better be writing a bunch of tickets because they're set up in areas where they know there's traffic problems, and they're more trained in traffic enforcement, and they're not answering calls like a regular patrol officer answering calls and dealing with calls for service. They're just out there to write tickets. So of
Yeah.
course, I mean, is there a quota? No, but if you're in a town with a moderate amount of traffic in an area that you're supposed to patrol that day to do some enforcement for 3 hours, if you don't in 3 hours write 6 or 7 tickets, I don't know what you were doing, you know. So that's really what it's not really a quota, but it certainly shows that you're right, that you're doing your job. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha. I mean, those donuts aren't going to eat themselves, So,
That's right.
all right. So this actually happened to me about a month ago. I got pulled over, and it was a really weird day. My stepfather just passed away, like literally that day. I was about to drive down to about an hour away where my mother was to tell. I'm an only child with a single mom, and so I was going to take care of her. We're in the process of buying a house, and I was trying to go run to the store really quickly before I left because I didn't know when I was going to be back, and I've got a wife and 5 kids and whatnot. I had so many things on my head, and I was speeding and I got pulled over. And I will say the cop was very fair. He's like, you know how fast you're going. Honestly, I don't even know how fast I was going. I am so scatterbrained, and let me tell you why. And he was very reasonable, and he kind of let me off. I was curious, if there ever is a guideline for the best way to interact with the police officer. Obviously, I mean, your bread and butter is helping people once they get that ticket. But I'm sure, when people get pulled over, there's lots of things that they can do to minimize the likelihood of getting a ticket or minimize the severity of the ticket. There's definitely some things I'm sure that people should never, ever, ever do. So maybe you can kind of give us a little breakdown on what people should do. If you're driving, you see those lights in your rearview mirror, what's the first thing you should do? What's the best operating procedure for doing this? And what, even if they're going to give you a ticket, no matter what maximizes your chances of working with an attorney like yourself and getting the best possible outcome? Does that make sense?
So there's a couple of
There's
good
a lot of
ground
questions there.
When you pull, so there's a lot of nonverbal cues. Okay, so police officers are trained. One of the one of the top ways police officers are injured and killed is just on motor vehicle stops and out on the road with accidents. It's not through assaults or shootings. It's actually, I think, the top way police officers are killed. They're just hit by other cars. So police officers are highly trained on how to keep themselves safe when they're out on the road on a motor vehicle stop or on a public assist. So when you pull over, don't just pull over onto the shoulder. Pull over further to the right. So if there's like a grassy area, maybe get those right wheels on the grass. If there's a further area, we don't got to pull over all the way onto the grass. But
Right.
so that's kind of telling the cop that you're sensitive to what the dangers that he has. It's going to get, it could give, the cop, it's going to give the cop a cue that you're at least
You're being favorable towards them.
with his safety, and whatnot, and in and of itself might not do anything, but so when they're gonna approach, obviously just keep your hand. I mean, people say like, put your hands on the thing, up here. Look, if you're a young kid or something like that, if you're a bunch of young kids in the car, maybe you want to, put your hands up and touch the ceiling or something like that. I think that's a little extreme. Just keep your hands on the top of the steering wheel. That's what I, just keep your, they can see into the car. They can see you're on top of the steering wheel. Don't start messing around to get your license yet until they they tell you to give it to them. But just stay still and whatnot. When they approach the car, don't even go to unroll the window yet. If the window's up, when they approach the car, they'll give you one of these. You roll the window down. And the two big questions that cops ask, look, a lot of cops don't even care. Like, hey, Officer so-and-so from the New York State Police or Trooper so-and-so, I got you doing 79 to 55 and need your license and registration, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good day for you because the cop isn't overzealous. He doesn't care. Like, this is what I got you doing. I need your license and registration, right? That's good. But, and then you get there, you know why I stopped you. You know how fast you were going, right? The know why I stopped you is, officer, I don't. Because you don't know why that you don't play the guessing game, don't do it. No, officer, I don't. Do you know what the speed limit is here? Now, unless you really know what the speed limit is, you just look at the sign, which most of us don't. Say, listen, officer, this is the line you give a police officer. It's very simple. Everyone knows a cop, all right? Listen, my brother's a police officer, my cousin, whatever, my uncle's a retired police officer. He said, if I ever get so they say to you, do you know the speed limit? Or do you know how fast you were going? Officer, my uncle's a retired police officer. And he said, if I ever get pulled over, be polite and respectful and ask for any courtesy you could extend me. So the thing is, you don't answer their questions because it's not designed to help you. It's designed for you to make inculpatory statements.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, human nature is you want to talk to be polite, or you want to start giving excuses, or you just want to, if I just admit that I was speeding, he's going to let me go. No, he's not going to let you, he's not going to let you go. He's doing it to bolster the case of the ticket he's going to write you.
Yeah.
And that's how you answer it. You answer, you do respond, and you do respond, but you don't answer his question. And then he says again, well, do you know how fast I was going? Officer, my uncle told me, don't give the cop a hard time. Don't be answering questions. Just be polite and respectful. And if he wants your license, give it to him. You're like, officer, I really don't, I don't really feel comfortable going back and forth. I don't want it to come off as disrespectful. You know what I mean? And just never answer their questions. Now you could say, listen, officer, I know a right to remain silent, and I'm not going to. You could say that. That's fine too. That's hard for people to say.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. That's just hard for people to say. Now, if they start saying, well, how come you don't want to answer my question? You can answer my questions. Officer, I really don't. I don't know, my uncle said, I have a right to remain silent, and just so you can get off the call as quickly as possible. Do you want my license, officer? If they haven't asked for it yet, but you engage them, but you don't answer their questions. All right. And especially you don't know why they pulled you over, and one time I had a cop, I don't know why he was giving me such a hard time. If I'm going to get a ticket, I'm going to get a ticket, whatever. And he just wouldn't stop. And I was like, look, I'm not disrespect. I said to him the same thing. Like, listen, officer, if you can give me a break, cut me. Listen, officer, if you can give me any courtesies. Do you know how fast you were going? Because the speed limit is. I did. Yeah, it's 55. You know how fast you were going? Look, officer, I'm not going to give you a hard time. Any courtesy you could extend me. And the guy just went on and on and on. And my registration was in like a center console. I said, my registration's in here. Do you mind if I open the center console? He goes, no, go ahead. So I opened it up, and my insurance card was on top of it. Take the insurance card out to move it. He starts screaming at me. I want the registration. I go, I'm just moving the card. I get it. I know what you want, So at the end of the day, he just wouldn't stop. He's like, I was like, officer, any courtesy you could extend me. That's why I just kept repeating, any courtesy you could extend me, be great. And I finally said, look, I'm not challenging your authority. No, if you could extend me a courtesy. I never answered his question. And he still gave me a ticket, but he wrote it down a little bit. So, you think, oh, I'm giving the cop a hard time. When you start telling the police officer, I don't want to answer your questions. I don't know how fast I was going, officer. I don't really feel comfortable, talking about this. You're basically telling him that you're an informed consumer, and they are less likely to screw with you than if you just play their game. That's what people don't understand. If he says, hey, you got any drugs in the car? No, I don't have anything. I would say no. I don't have anything illegal in the car. You could say I'm not answering any questions. I would just say no. I don't have anything illegal in the car. I said, do you mind if I look? Absolutely not. I don't consent to searches. So people will think like, oh my God, the cop. I better let the cop look. No, you're letting him know you're an informed consumer. You know what the law is.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not consenting to searches. You're not getting out of the car unless they order you out of the car. That's another thing. When they start escalating it for some bizarre reason. You mind stepping out of the car? Yes, I do mind stepping out of the car, officer. I'm not getting out of the car. What I tell people to say is, are you asking me or are you ordering me? Because if yes, they do. They're slick, like, I asked them to get out of the car. I didn't tell them to get out of the car, because if they order you out of the car, then they're utilizing the authority of their office.
Yeah.
They're to seize you. It's a seizure, And a lot of people will say, don't get out of the car unless they tell you you're under arrest. Okay, I'm not going that far, because bad things can happen. You know what I mean? If they order you, I always, the way I look at it, I just say, are you asking me to get out of the car, officer, or are you ordering me to get out of the car? And then, unless they say I'm ordering you to get out of the car, you don't get out of the car. Well, I just want you to get out of the car. I'm telling you to get out of the car. Are you ordering me? I guess telling you is good enough too.
Yeah.
Are you ordering me, officer, or are you asking me to get out of the car? Make them order you. I say, if they order you to get out of the car, do what they tell you to do, because force may be coming behind it, whether it's justified or not. I think you protected yourself constitutionally by making them say, I'm ordering you to get out of the car. I think any reasonable person would say that's not voluntary. He's seizing you. That is force. A verbal order is force. It's on a lower level, the use of force continuum. So I say, now, when you get out of the car, you roll the windows up, you shut the car off, you get out of the car, you lock your car, and you put your keys in your pockets. Why? Because there is a exception to the warrant requirement with a car, with an automobile, that if they see something that looks suspicious, but they can't quite identify it as contraband. Like, for example, let's just say they see a piece of metal, it looks like the end of a knife, right? Like, it's kind of like cockeyed in there a little bit, right? They can't identify it as a knife, but it looks like it could be a knife, right? That's reasonable suspicion to believe it's a knife, all right? Because it's an automobile, if what they see is grabbable or reachable, they don't need a warrant to now search your vehicle. That gives them a right to go in without a search warrant, even if it's not a knife, because they had they reasonably suspected it was a knife, and it could have been an illegal knife. It could have been a knife that you needed like a permit to have, right? So you have some piece of metal here, and you get out of your car, all this, or they see something, shiny object, or they might see some pills. You're like I'm always spilling Tic Tacs in my car. I guess the orange ones, I guess they're okay, but the white ones, that looks like drugs.
That looks like drugs.
And if you have drugs, if you have prescription medicine, it has to be in the bottle. So you can't say, you know how you put the pills, like the old timers put the pills.
Yeah.
With
little cases or
those little things where you take it at a certain time, and that technically that's a felony. It has to be in the prescription bottle. So they see some Tic Tacs, they go, look like drugs, and even if it's a prescription drug, but it's out of a pill, out of the prescription bottle, it's a felony.
I did not know that.
That gets them in. Now, if the car is locked and the windows are rolled up, it's not grabbable. It's not grabbable. It's not reachable. So then they have to get a warrant, and they're not going to do that. Of course, they're not going to get a warrant. If they see something that is vague. Obviously, if they see a gun, you get up and your gun falls out, and you roll the windows. Your gun falls out or something, and you roll the windows up, and they're like, "That's a gun." Yo, give me the keys, or I'm going to smash the window open. Because you can see it's clearly contraband. It's in plain view.
Right.
If contraband is in plain view, that whole thing about, it's not grabbable, they have to identify it as an illegal substance,
right.
or have probable cause to believe, it's an illegal substance. Like a pill, well, that could be a Tic Tac, or it could be an illegal substance. But, bag of weed, and it's in the way bag. Well, now marijuana has just been legalized a couple of days ago in New York State. But in a state where it's illegal to have marijuana and it's packaged consistent with marijuana, it looks like marijuana. Yeah, then they can still go in without a warrant. But if they see something that looks vague and amorphous, but it could be something, but it's not grabbable, they're out of luck. And they say, what do you do that for? Well, it's not grabbable now. Nothing's grabbable. So you see something you think is suspicious, you're going to have to get a warrant. And you tell a cop that, you're telling him, I'm an informed consumer. I
Hmm.
know what the game is here, and I know it is good or better than you. Listen, they can go pull over the next guy that doesn't know any of this and harass him, or they can
Yeah.
harass you, and they can see the civilian complaint that is building by the second. What are they going to do?
Yeah. Path of least
Go
resistance.
get someone else to harass. The whole thing where call the dog, call your dog. They can only hold you for a reasonable amount of time. They have to have reasonable suspicion to believe you have contraband in the car to call a dog. Most of the time, they don't even got a dog on duty. Like you see the videos, right, on YouTube, right? But most of the ones you don't see is when they threaten to call a dog, and there is no dog even on duty.
Yeah.
So call your dog, but you can only hold someone. So if they hold you for an hour and a half for a dog, and then they search your car and they find cocaine, it's going to be thrown out because they can only hold you for a reasonable amount of time. So I think
Hmm.
in like New York State, the rule of thumb is like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So go call your dog. Go get your mutt to go whatever he wants to do. Don't let any of that intimidate you. Assert your rights politely and calmly. So that's how you handle the traffic stop as it escalates.
So let me ask you a related question. I have a lot of friends. I've actually looked into getting one myself who have a concealed carry license. I don't know if it's different on a state by state basis, but what do you do if you get pulled over and you're packing legal heat?
I think under the law, you're supposed to, if you have a concealed carry permit, because it comes up when they run your license that you have
Hmm.
a CCP, you're supposed to declare and tell them whether or not you have a weapon on you at that moment.
Okay.
In New York State, probably other states too. I don't, I don't know, I
Yeah.
really don't deal with that issue. So if someone were to ever contact me and said, hey, I was arrested with a gun in a car, again, this comes down to specialization, and I have a permit or I didn't have a permit or I was transporting it from point A to point B, because there are ways you can transport a firearm through states that you don't have a permit in, but you're going to be legal in another state. Like if you move from New York to Florida and
Yeah.
you have a permit to carry in Florida, you have a permit to carry in New York, and New Jersey does not have reciprocity. There are ways under federal law that you can carry that weapon. Then you got to take it apart. You got to have, it has to be locked in the trunk, and there has to be some. There's a whole thing, ways that you can carry you can carry it. But if that ever happened to me, I would refer them to a specialist who did more conventional criminal defense. It comes down to specialization. That's why I don't really, know that answer. I've never really, no one's ever called me for that. But if they did, I would take some information from them, and I know exactly who in New York State to refer them to.
Hmm.
That's how I run my law practice. If I take your case, I know 1,000% how to do it. If it's out of my wheelhouse at all, and that happens. I had a friend of mine who has I think at Georgia. He had a Georgia carrier permit, and South Carolina had reciprocity. So he was legal to carry his gun in South or North, whatever other state he was in. It was either North or South Carolina. Got pulled over, declared he had a CCP, and the cop says, "Okay, fine." He's and I have my firearm on me. And he goes, "Okay." He goes, "Where's the gun?" He goes, "Well, actually, it's in the door." And the cop says, "Okay, well, in North Carolina, you have to carry the weapon on you in a car on your person.
Hmm.
So right now, this is a felony. I'm not arresting you, but other cops will. So you got to be very careful when you're carrying a weapon, even in your own state. That if you have a concealed carry permit, you got to know if you're in a car, whereas you could have a concealed carry permit, and you could be, well, I guess the only way you can carry it is on your person. But maybe there's a specific rule that says, hey, unlike if you go in your home, you can put your gun up. You got to keep, if you have a gun on you, you have to keep it on your person in a vehicle. Otherwise, that's a crime. So you got to know what the terms of your CCP is.
Yeah.
Maybe you only have a target and hunting permit. I don't know. Maybe because you have a target and hunting permit, you got to carry your firearms have to be in the trunk. I know in certain states, even you might have a permit to a hunting permit, but you can't hunt with a handgun. So you got to
Right.
know the nuances. Like I said, you could have a prescription medicine, but it's being carried outside of that prescription bottle. That's a felony. Whereas if it's in the bottle, it's not a felony. there's a lot of nuance. Just because you have a concealed carry permit, you really got to know when you get yours, really know and understand what the rules and regulations and the restrictions are to what you can do with your concealed carry permit.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we're talking about interstate trafficking right now, and getting stopped carrying a gun, etc. Let's talk about intra-state, right? So we started talking about this a bit at the top of the hour here, at the top of the half hour, and you mentioned city states versus city tickets versus state tickets, and how they differ depending upon who tickets you. I know that there's city police, there's highway patrol, there's the sheriffs. I don't know if sheriffs ever write tickets or not, but how do all of those tickets relate? What do we need to do? What makes them different? What makes fighting them different, etc.?
Okay, so New York State, like many states, have New York State has 62 counties, and they have 62 county courts. But in each county, there are cities. There are cities other than New York City. Each county might have small cities, towns, and villages. Every town, village, and city in New York State has a local court. The traffic tickets are handled in the local courts of these towns, villages, and cities. So if you get pulled over in the town of Bedford, your case is being returnable to the Bedford Town Court. And there's about 1,400 local village, town, and city courts in New York State. This is exclusive of New York City. All right, I'm just outside New York City. So your case is going to be heard in one of 1,400 courts. Those judges are elected officials. We elect them every 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when in those courts, it's a criminal proceeding. You're not charged with a crime if it's an infraction like speeding, unless it's a suspended license or reckless driving, then it's a misdemeanor. But even though it's not, the criminal procedure, the procedure on litigating tickets is covered by the CPL, criminal procedure law. It's a judicial proceeding. So you're entitled to discovery, disclosure. You can make motions to dismiss. You could sometimes demand pretrial hearings. You have a right to that. They can't find you guilty unless the state proves their case beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest standard the law allows. Also, you could do plea bargains. You can negotiate with the prosecutor, plead your client guilty to something less than what you're doing, which is the preferred method because you pay a small fine, and you make sure you plead your client guilty to something that doesn't trigger insurance increases. The New York City traffic court system is literally called the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles Traffic Violations Bureau, NYS DMV TVB. Okay, it's a court of the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles. It's an administrative tribunal. Here's what I mean. Let's just take it away from driver's licenses for a second.
Yeah.
It's a little more clear to understand. You go to a liquor store, they have a license to sell, booze. Pick up a bottle of scotch, you walk out the door, right? In New York State, and every state has a state liquor authority that grants this owner, after he made an application, the right to sell alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And with that right, he's prohibited under his state license to sell alcohol to sell to anyone who's under 21 years of age, right? And if he does that, he's violating the terms of his liquor license.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, to sell alcohol to a minor is also a crime in every state and under the New York State penal law. So if he gets, let's say the state liquor authority does a sting, the investigators, they send someone in who's 20, then they do this, right? They're not police officers, they're state liquor authority officers, right? It's just them, and sure enough, they didn't ID the person. Then they're going to go in there and they're going to write the guy a ticket, which is going to be returnable to the state liquor authority court. It's not going to go to a regular court because they didn't involve the police with it. He's not going to. So, and then those state liquor authority inspectors are not police officers. Their authority runs to the fact that you've consented to have a license to sell liquor from them, to sell alcohol, and they just caught you violating it. Now they're going to put you before their tribunal to try you administratively. It's an administrative proceeding, right? Now they could have came in with the police as well, and oftentimes that's how they do it.
Right.
They'll have a joint operation. The cop's going to write you up on a misdemeanor and send you to a local court, and they're going to send you to a state liquor authority. You're going to have 2 proceedings, but sometimes you just do it on their own without involving the police. So that liquor authority investigator is an employee of the state liquor authority.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing in with this New York with a driver's license. By virtue of the fact that you have a driver's license or a driver's license from another state, and you drive in New York State, you've agreed administratively to all the vehicle and traffic laws. You've promised not to speed. By virtue of the fact you have a license, you promise not to run stop signs. So when a police officer gives you a police officer, it's not the reason why a police officer can write you a ticket anywhere in New York State is by virtue of being a police officer. The New York State Department of Motor Vehicles, so like let's just say they deputize them as DMV enforcement officers. Mm-hmm. So they're acting in their administrative and a legal capacity. In New York City, the New York City court system, their criminal court system, doesn't want anything to do with traffic tickets. So the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles has set up their own court, the Traffic Violations Bureau. And so when you get a ticket in New York City, yes, it was written by a police officer. It's returned to the Traffic Violations Bureau. It's an administrative proceeding. It's not a judicial proceeding. The judges there are called ALJs, administrative law judges. The only authority they have over you is what's been granted to them by the fact that you've either driven on a New York State roadway or you have a license. And so their ability to punish you is limited. You can actually go to jail for a speeding ticket or any violation in a judicial court. They don't send you to jail, but you can go to jail. The fines are higher outside of New York City. And they can suspend your license. In New York City, the Traffic Violations Bureau, they can't send you to jail. And because you have less due process rights, the fines are lower. And the big one in New York City is the Traffic Violations Bureau does not allow plea bargainings. So I can't go there and negotiate if my client can be charged with a 6-point speed, 25 miles an hour over the limit. I can't go there and say, look, he has a clean driving record. It was 3:00 in the morning. How about a parking ticket? They won't do that. We take every case in New York City goes to trial. The decision-making process, if you get a ticket in New York City, is if I do nothing, I'm found guilty as charged 100% of the time. They also don't allow not only do they not allow plea bargains, there's no motion practice. You have no right to discovery. You have no right to disclosure. And the standard of review is if the state or the police officer proved the case by clear and convincing evidence. That's the standard of review. So it's an administrative tribunal in New York City, and they're handled differently, and we handle them differently than we do outside of New York City.
Oh, I'm glad you can keep that straight. That feels very, very convoluted to me as an outsider. Of course,
convoluted, you know.
I live in small town Kansas, so for me, big city is big city, period. So it feels like a headache. So now you talked about administrative proceedings, you talked about judicial proceedings. I did have a note to actually ask you about. We started to talk about the other day when you were setting up for this about special proceedings in general. So what are special proceedings? Do you do special proceedings? What is a special proceeding, etc.?
Well, there's one main one I do. We call them coram nobis proceedings.
Coram nobis?
Coram nobis proceedings. That's a big fancy Latin word for correct the record.
Okay.
What happens a lot of times is someone doesn't realize the ramifications of pleading guilty to something. Like, for example, the common thing is they had 2 speeding tickets within 12 months, and now they got a third one, and they just plead guilty to it without realizing that 3 speeding convictions in 18 months results in a minimum 6-month license revocation. And they drive, maybe they drive for the TLC, or they got the CDL or something, or maybe they just need to get to work. There's no other way of practically getting to work, and they plead guilty, and the court accepts their guilty plea, and then like a week later, they get a nasty gram from the DMV saying, you got 3 speeding tickets, we're revoking you, bring your license in by this date. And a revocation is very serious, because if you don't bring your license in by that date, they revoke you on that date, but your 6 months doesn't start until you hand your license in. So a lot of people don't realize that. And then you got to make an application to get it back. So you could apply 6 months later. It takes them a couple months to approve it. So a 6-month revocation is 8 or 9 months. So and you can't really, you actually, in that case, you actually can get conditional privileges. If it was your first one, oftentimes revocation, you can't get conditional privileges. So they call me in a panic. I go, well, the only thing I can do to avoid this is I got to go back to one of your courts where you pled guilty and vacate the conviction.
Mm.
And you can raise a quorum nobis issue on ineffective assistance of counsel. So they represent themselves. They were pro se.
Mm-hmm.
So they ineffectively represented themselves. I throw my client under the bus.
Yeah.
He didn't know what the hell he was doing, you know? The guy's a moron. What I gotta tell you, Joe? Well, we don't say it like that. We don't say it like that. I mean, we say, look, you know, he was pro se. You know, he was trying to be honest. You know, he has a clean driving record. Although he got a couple speeding tickets here and there. He didn't understand the regulations. He didn't. You know what I mean? He didn't effectively assist. I mean, because a lawyer should tell you that. You say, hey, how many other? Oh wait, you can't plead guilty to this.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna do it, you gotta do it knowingly, and the attorney has to make a record that, you know, he advised them. Somewhere has to be a record that you advised them to cover yourself. So yeah, we just say he ineffectively, he didn't realize it, and he should have realized it, or whatever. He didn't realize it. He would have never done this, and he didn't realize he had a right to plea bargain. He didn't realize, because we go to court for our clients. That's another thing. They don't realize we can go to court for them. So they might live far away, and like they might feel they have a meritorious defense, but they just plead guilty because they don't want to drive 8 hours round trip. We can go to court for them. And it's basically, I put together a package, and they're going to grant it. You know, I mean, in rare situations, and sometimes you just get, in plain English, a prick judge. You know, you know what I mean. And then which kind of sucks for the client, because then we got to go to another. He's got to pay me again to do it. But you know, again, I cover the entire state, so I'll know. I could pick any one. I don't got to pick the third one. I could pick the first one. It doesn't matter.
You know? So you can find a better place to appeal to.
So if there's an 8-point speed and 2 4-point speeds, and everything being equal, I'm going to go after the 8-point speed, because there's also additional fines and surcharges for hitting too many points. So I'm going to want to sanitize that and save them some money there. You know, and so yeah, you know, I'll have them do a defensive driving course in intervening time to show, you know, to show mitigation to the court as well. So that we'll do a quorum nobis proceeding on that. Also, in New York State now, it's very difficult to get your license back after 3 DWIs in a 25-year look-back period. You might be permanently revoked, not just because of the 3 DWIs, but because of other points on your record. It's very nuanced.
Yeah.
So they changed the law in 2012. What's happening with people is they have, you know, they pled guilty to something in 1997 that's haunting them now, because in 2018 that was a third DWI, but the rules weren't even in effect in 1997. So I'm not even arguing ineffective assistance to counsel. I'm arguing that it's inherently inequitable, you know, and we need to vacate, you know, that the one from 1997, because the one in 2018, you know, there's probably a record that the court even made a record that, you know, on a multiple DWI, you know, you may not be able to get your license back. So you might have done it knowingly, but so we might go back and remove just some points off the record, because it's three or four DWIs in conjunction with 20 or more points. There's a lot of nuances to it, and so what I'm doing with a lot of people is I'm sanitizing, really not DWIs. It's very hard to remove a DWI because the prosecutor is going to fight that hard. And the judge is going to be like, if I do this, I'm putting this guy who has numerous DWIs back on the road, and I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
So what I do is I nip at the edges. You know, I'll take the other ones down. So I can say, look, he's not going to, because even if you sanitize it to the point where he can get his license back, there's going to be at least 5-year hold the way I do it. And I tell him, so the judge knows you're not directly putting this guy back on the road. He's still going to go through an administrative process. And the vast majority of the times they'll do that. So those are special proceedings I do, you know, in courts. And of course, if your issue is in New York City, it's an administrative tribunal, they don't entertain those kind of motions. So once you're found guilty in New York City, you could appeal it. You have a limited amount of time to appeal it. And if you win the appeal, which you're probably not going to win, great, it gets vacated. But that's your only remedy, an appeal. There's no mechanism to make a motion to vacate on buyer's remorse in New York City because of the nature of the court.
What is the time frame on that? How much time do you have to appeal?
You have 30 days in and outside New York City to file a motion, to file a notice of appeal on a conviction. Now, In the DMV, if you get suspended or revoked in the DMV and you make a reapplication to get your license back, and they deny it, they generally give you 60 days to file a notice of appeal. But from a conviction on a traffic infraction or a misdemeanor in a misdemeanor or traffic infraction in a regular court or an infraction in the traffic court, it's 30 days. 30 days to file your notice of appeal. And then you got to get the record and whatnot. And then from a time frame you get your record, you have, the stenographer's record, you have 30 days to submit your appellate brief. This is in New York City court system. Outside New York City court system, you file your notice of appeal, you perfect your appellate papers, and I think you have like a year or something like that to actually file your papers, but they'll extend that if you need it extended. So it's a little different, but the process is generally the same on an appeal.
Gotcha. Well, once again, I'm glad you know these things, because I think it's really hard for the average person to keep these things in mind. And I just want to underscore for all of our listeners, that's why you want to work with a professional like Michael. I mean, they know the law, they know the ins and the outs, they are experts in their field. And as somebody who one time self-represented poorly, I can tell you, it doesn't work out well for you. Always, always, always lean on the expertise of a competent, qualified attorney. And I think that Mr. Palumbo here is absolutely one of the best. He really just seems like he knows all of the ins and outs of all of the different nuances of New York state law. So that's crazy. Well, here in a minute, I'm actually going to ask you a few more questions. I'm going to ask you about things like whether or not COVID has affected your practice or the number of tickets. I also want to ask you about if there's any cases that you generally would refuse to take, or what are the hallmarks that make a losing case. But before we do that, we do have to read from our second sponsor here. So I'll make myself the big guy. Our second sponsor is hundreds of customers, Rocket SEO. Are you a business owner who knows that being on page one of Google is important, but you're also afraid to work with an SEO company because you know that SEO, or search engine optimization, is oftentimes very expensive and very slow? Well, not anymore. Rocket SEO, from hundreds of customers, which is owned by yours truly, forces you to page one of Google safely and legally through the power of the news. National media campaigns that rank you instantly, leveraging the power of ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and more, can push your website's rankings to page one of Google in as little as 24 to 48 hours. That leverages the power of major media brands to push your website up, and also to leverage their brands and get you on page one as well. Visit hundredsofcustomers.com/rocket. That's all spelled out, hundredsofcustomers.com/rocket, to learn more or to schedule a consultation with yours truly. That being said, let's jump back into this. So, Michael, tell me about COVID. So I've worked with attorneys. I have a client who is an injury attorney. Actually, I have two clients that are injury attorneys in New York City. Totally different field than traffic ticket law. And the attorneys were telling me that, so one of them works in a building that normally sees, I want to say, like 40, 50,000 people a day in a normal season. And he said ever since COVID hit, it sees about 100 to 200 people a day, which just blew my mind. I mean, first off, a building that sees that many normally just blows my mind, but to see that level of a reduction is crazy. So has COVID affected the number of tickets, do you think, that are being given out? Are more people driving? Are fewer people driving? And how has it affected your practice, if at all?
Okay, well, towards like the second week in March of 2000, people really start to panic about this COVID, and Cuomo was writing his edicts, which I believe much of it was unconstitutional. We can segue into that if you want, but excuse me. Well, I'm going to segue into it right now. This is why
I'll leave that in your week. Yeah, that's totally up to you. I will not force you to get political, but I'm very happy to have these conversations.
The law. I'm just analyzing the law.
Just the law.
I'm not saying anything negative about him personally, but under the executive law, when there's a declared emergency, and I think we probably still could be consider being a declared emergency. The executive, under the executive law, has the right to modify any rule, regulation, or law of the state, or a local municipality, or an administrative agency. So he has broad powers, but it's a law to modify. He can modify the law. So in other words, the governor could say we have a declared state of emergency in Greene County because of we have all this flooding or whatever. Like we had a major storm in the Catskill region in Greene County, and I 87 is flooded and it's dangerous. So I'm going to close I-87 from this point to that point. He could do that, but then he can't order businesses, which he was doing, along the route to close. That's not part of that's not part of his executive authority. And so what they were doing was they were saying they were edicting, well, if you're an essential business, you can stay open. Well, why is Home Depot an essential business, but a smaller hardware store wasn't?
Mm-hmm.
And they're ordering restaurants to close. I mean, how can you order? You can't order. You could say the road to get to the restaurant is closed, right? You can close a road, or maybe they could say, well, you have to, you got to stop serving alcohol at 4 a.m. Well, now you got to stop serving alcohol at midnight or something like that. But what they were doing, they were arbitrarily closing things that, and I read the executive law and I read the executive orders, and I'm not 100% wrong, because recently the state legislature just called back the governor's powers over this because of the way this particular governor did it. I'm not getting political. I'm just saying, yeah. I believe, and there are lawsuits going on over this, but good luck. You know what I mean? Because by the time they're heard, it'll be moot.
Yeah.
In my opinion, there are lawsuits over this. It was arbitrary and capricious, and not just that. It was beyond the authority he had in the executive law. And so I don't think that that a lot of the orders that they gave, then they enforced them, through police powers. And the way they got a lot of these restaurants was through the state liquor authority, just pulling their licenses. Now, again, I said I just went through what an administrative proceeding is. You have less rights.
Yeah.
So, if you have to pull someone's liquor license and he had to go to a court of law, you could say, wait a minute, I'm going to ask this court, I'm going to be irreparably harmed, right? You got to keep my license. You got to let me have my license and sell until you make a final adjudication. You could do that in the court of law. You can get that relief. You're not going to get that relief in the state liquor authority. You're shut down until you win the hearing. You just lost. So a lot of the edicts were illegal. But however, in my opinion, I guess other people could have different opinions. But what ended up happening was late last March, like towards the latter third of last March. I don't know. You're in Kansas, but anyone who's in New York knows you could drive along highways that were constant parking lots, and they were vacant. The city, it was like a pleasure to drive, and no one was driving anywhere. So yeah, my business went from 3 or 4 new cases a day, 15 calls, whatever, to absolutely nothing. I mean, I think I did last April, I did 15 cases. I only took in 15 cases, where I'm taking in, 100, 150, maybe a bad month, 60, 70, 80, you know what I mean? Like, so that's how it went down. And I'm back to, I'm not back to where I was pre-COVID, but it's kind of like back to normal-ish. It's like on a low, it's on a low end of normal at this point. So people are now moving around, things have bounced back, but, more people are working in Zoom now. What I think is that there's such a high volume of traffic in and around the New York City area and a lot of other parts of New York State that with less traffic, you can get more tickets.
Yeah, fewer targets.
Speed, you can't even do 5 miles an hour. So there were so many traffic jams. Now everything's so loose that you gotta have more people speed. So I'm like, well, we might even get more business out of this down the road. Who knows if the volume doesn't come back to where it was? Because you don't even know, not living in New York City, like you could just get a traffic jam at any given time. I'm not just talking Manhattan. I'm talking like the Hudson River Parkway, the Bronx River Parkway, the Belt Parkway, all the parkways and roadways around New York City and Long Island, and it's a nightmare. So, but no, it's come back, and I think things are getting back to normal overall. But yeah, it was a big hit. But listen, I'm not complaining because a lot of people lost a lot more than me. I
Yeah.
pivoted. In my case, I downsized my office. My lease was pretty much up anyhow. I downsized. I consolidated, and I moved forward. And look, I'm not complaining because so many people have it even now so much harder than me.
Gotcha. Have you done any? I've seen a lot of things, from the hearings that happened about the election to a lot of other things been going on where people will zoom into the courtroom, zoom into administrative proceedings, etc. Have you done anything like that, or has all of your stuff still been mostly what you would normally do in person, still been in person?
Um, Again, it's 1,400 courts in the state of New York, and everyone has his own little fiefdom.
Fair.
So, I mean, there are courts that pivoted, and we could do stuff through Zoom or through the mail. Where there were a lot of courts I was already doing stuff through the mail. And so, but a lot of them are there's a couple courts that one of my employees actually is working a lot with a couple courts to help because he's one of my employees is a prosecutor in another town, so I can't take the one particular court since he works for me. I can't take any cases there. He's a part-time prosecutor, so he knows he's hooked in with all these courts, and he's been helping a couple courts get to do it by mail. But there are just some courts that are just overly, in my opinion, overly concerned about the ethics involved, and you always got to worry about judicial ethics, but you're really not supervising the case, and you're really not hurting the public just to do things by mail. But some courts are reluctant.
Yeah.
Some courts are not reluctant. There are some courts out there. Most courts have more than one judge, and if it gets assigned to one judge, we could do it by mail. The other one, you still got to come in. So a lot of courts have one. And I actually just did a case. I got it right here. Actually, I don't know if you could see it. Decision at the Oath Court, Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings. This is not the Department of Motor Vehicles administrative court. It's a New York City administrative court where my client was actually charged with a misdemeanor. Um, he struck a bicyclist while he was driving along, and the bicyclist was injured, so he was charged with a crime, which was returnable to this court. And they did there was no Zoom, but they did it by phone conference. We did the trial by phone conference, and I just got decision back, and the case was dismissed. So some courts are doing full blown trials by phone conference, and New York City Traffic Court, the lawyers and individuals still have to physically appear in court, but the police officers are testifying remotely, which we feel, me and a bunch of my other colleagues that do a lot of business in New York City Traffic Violations Bureau, feel it's a constitutional violation because they have not promulgated rules and regulations to have the police officers appear by Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
and the individuals or any lawyer representing someone still has to go to court, and in Cuomo of Cuomo's edicts of his, which he could have actually modified the rule and regulation. He could have actually wrote in his executive order that the cops could testify remotely. He didn't do it. He didn't change the rule under the emergency, and the DMV just decided, well, this is what we're going to do now.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with that is that if you're an administrative agency of the state of New York or any state, every state has an Administrative Procedure Act, which tells you how you can modify and change your administrative rules and regulations that govern how that administrative agency runs. So, I can't just, if I file a notice of appeal in New York City and it's 31 days old, they're going to reject it. They say the rules say 30 days. Too bad, so sad, right? I can't just say, yeah, but it's only 1 day. Come on. Let's let it slide in. That's not the rule, right? But now, when it suits the tribunal, there's no rule. They're like, oh, this is how we're going to do it. This is the way it's going to be done now because of COVID. Well, the governor didn't say you could do it, and he had the authority to say you could. That would have been a legitimate exercise of his authority, right? He didn't say it. You didn't create any rules for it. We had, because you have to have rules, you have to have notice, you have to have public hearings on it. None of that happened. literally the rule says on how the trials proceed in the New York City traffic court, the officer steps up to the Diaz. It literally says that. So we have a lawsuit going in Albany over this issue, over the constitutionality of allowing the arresting officer to not appear in court and testify. And there are other due process. I don't want to go too far in the weeds over that, but remember, how do I even start talking about it?
Trying to backtrack now. We're talking about COVID. We're talking about whether it's affected your practice, and then
Yeah,
we kind of jumped the shark on that one a little bit. That's all right. I mean, it's all fascinating.
It's interesting stuff. Though. Yeah, I mean, I hope people.
I think your brain works like my brain.
Are, like, dying. I hope they're still watching at this point. You know, I mean, this is stuff your lawyer needs to know in any practice area. If you hire a lawyer that does, let's say, estate planning, you better understand the local Medicaid office for when a Medicaid application has to go in, and who those hearing officers are, and the difference between that one and maybe I file it in this county instead. They better know these nuances of what they better have the finger on the pulse of what's going on wherever they are. This is important stuff for lawyers. This is my wheelhouse. You said, is there every case I turned down? No, there's no case that I turned down that's in my wheelhouse that I know how to do. I turned down every single case that it's I'm really not appropriate for. I turn down cases that I know, even though I might have the skill and the know-how to do it, it's not my bread and butter.
Yeah.
And they're going to be better suited to it for a different lawyer. Those are the cases I turn down.
Okay, that makes sense. So just out of curiosity, what would you say would make for a losing case? Some people maybe come to you with a ticket or something and you're just like, this is really bad, or I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, but maybe we can do A, B, and C. Like what makes for a really bad ticket? What makes for something that makes you at least, think twice about whether or not you want to handle the ticket? Or is it you're undauntable, undaunted?
Well, I'm going to give you what's a bad case. I'm going to give you a case. There are cases you don't want to handle. Okay. So
yeah,
the bad case is 134 miles an hour in a 55 zone. It's not. That's the highest speed I've yet to handle. 134 in a 55. It's a funny story.
What was the driver driving? Was it like a sports car or?
I don't remember, but all right, there's this group, there's this club or something, these car enthusiasts, and they go around the country every year doing a cannonball run. I mean, there was a movie with Burt Reynolds. Cannonball Run. They have to drive around the country, circumnavigate, right? But there's two cannonball runs that actually still exist. One cannonball run is you have to average 55 miles an hour. So it's the person who averaged 55 miles an hour, closest to 55 miles an hour, wins. So it's like they're human about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Laws, and what they basically have is they have like two drivers driving, like they'll have two guys driving and they try not to stop too long and whatnot. But the other one is they're still living in the 70s, where they just like fly around the country. And this is what the guy was doing. He was on a cannonball run, and he got caught for doing 134 and a 55. So I'm like, oh my God. Now, New York State does not have reckless driving per se. Many states do. So if you're driving over a certain mile an hour, or if you're driving a certain mile an hour over the speed limit, like in Connecticut, it's 30. It's 30 over the speed limit, so you can get an 86 or 85 and a 55. They can write you for reckless driving, or just speeding. They can go either way, right? So New York State does not have a reckless driving per se. However, at 134 miles an hour, now I have all the case law on point too. I mean, they can't do it, okay? But that doesn't stop some prosecutors from doing it. So I don't really know if they're going to upgrade the charges. Will I defeat the charges if they upgrade them? Yes. But again, where are you going to defeat it? So they could upgrade the charges, and I could make my motion, and the trial judge tells me no, and then he gets convicted, and then of reckless driving, and then I got to do it on the, it costs the client a lot of money, a lot of aggravation, So I was concerned about that. So I'm like, man, 134 now. I did tell you that anyone you can do jail time for a speeding ticket. So here's
Yeah.
another issue you got. You could do up to 30 days for this. And
Mm.
of course, no one wants to go to jail.
No.
So I'm like, look, you have jail on the table. I don't, I'm like, I think he had an out of state license. I'm like, listen, the question isn't whether or not you're going to lose your privileges to drive in New York for a period of time. The question is whether or not you're going to go to jail. That's the question in this case. I'm going to just try to keep you out of jail and get a minimal suspension time. So, and because he had an out of state license. So I took the case, and I was kind of hoping he didn't hire me, but he did. And it was like someplace in upstate New York. I don't know. It was one of those counties, like Otsego County, one of those ones that start with an O. One of the O
Yeah.
counties, like 7 or 8 of them. So I called the district attorney's office, and I'm like, I tell him my name. They kind of knew who I was. I'm like, yeah, I got this guy. I'm like, he has a clean driving record, but it's a really bad speed. It's 134 miles an hour. He goes, 134 miles an hour? He goes, wait a minute. And he takes the phone like a wave. Hey guys, the guy was doing 134. I got his lawyer on the phone, and everyone just starts laughing. Oh my god!
You were a celebrity all of a
Oh my
sudden.
god! So, what do we come out? I was like, well, look, what are we gonna do? Look, just he goes, send me his abstract, and we'll work it out. And he ended up giving me a 3-point speed. It's like, and look, I'm a great lawyer and stuff, and I know how to prep a case and everything.
Yeah.
I know what to do, but this is a really, really bad case. This is just like, like you want
At
to take
least
a
it wasn't a
defensive
school
driving.
zone.
I think I have to take the New York State defensive driving course and
Yeah.
whatnot. So yeah, that was. But look, I'll take the case, and I'm going to work the case. I'm going to advocate for my client, because from that aspect, there really is no bad. I'm not going to turn anyone away. I'm going to tell them, listen, this is what I'm going to try to do for you. This is, I hit a home run with that one. But honestly, I got lucky because the prosecutor had a sense of humor about it, and they kind of knew who I was. They didn't really want to give me too much of a hard time. Look, if they said 6-point speed, they said anything, I was going to take it. I had to take it because I didn't want to risk, because a judge could decide, they could put pressure on a prosecutor, which is improper, but they do that sometimes. You're especially in these. Who knows what could happen.
Yeah.
I had to close that case out as quickly as I could. And here, that's another issue. A lot of times, the way I get leverage on a case is I prep the cases for trial. Every single one I prep for trial. I'm ready for trial. That gives me leverage to negotiate a plea bargain. And a lot of times in my prep for my trial prep, they don't do it right. They don't give me the information I'm entitled to. They don't do it timely. They falter along the way. Okay, and now actually I can move to dismiss. Excuse me. I got leverage to dismiss, and I still don't do that. And I explained to my client, if I could have moved to dismiss, and and usually over that issue, the judge is not going to just say no. If I'm correct, it's more of a routine thing. They're gonna say yes. If they didn't do their discovery and disclosure, and I got the evidence, they know they got to dismiss it. But the problem is it's procedural dismissal. It's not a final adjudication on the merits, so they can reindict. And oftentimes prosecutors reindict. So I tell my clients, yeah, I could have got it dismissed, and your case is over. I'm done. But then they're going to come knocking on your door in 3 weeks, and they're going to hand you another ticket. And it's a new case, and now they're not going to play ball with me. So by taking a parking ticket, yeah, you have to pay $100 fine. I understand that. It's a final adjudication on the merits. So a lot of times what I do, the method I do is I'll prep my case for trial, and I'll have leverage to get the case dismissed, and I'll let them know it. And a lot of times I'll walk into court with my motion, or if the prosecutor's being a jerk and he won't give me an offer, I'll file my motion in advance. But I'll walk in, I will file my motion, or I'm ready to go. And I'm like, look, I got the motion, or the motion's pending. You didn't even, of course, they never oppose it. The prosecutors will give you a hard time, and then you start make them do work. They never do work. It's like, listen, I'm here. I really don't like the way you treated me, but you know what? We don't need this. Why don't you just make me the offer for the parking ticket? And I sound like I'm doing the prosecutor a favor. I'm doing my client a favor. Because if he's giving me such a hard time, there's a greater propensity that he's going to go after my client once this case gets dismissed. It's a final adjudication. I'm at the judge. We worked it out. I'm going to withdraw. And the judge loves me because they don't got to make a decision. So we worked it out. I'm withdrawing my motion, and we're gonna allocate to a parking ticket or jaywalking or something that doesn't trigger insurance increases, doesn't impact the driving record. And my client might say, "But why did you do that?" Not no, it was in my client's interest to do that. Final adjudication on the merits, case closed. I don't care what anyone says; they can never come back to haunt you. So, so that's a method of doing it. And a lot of lawyers, I see lawyers stand in court and they just force it and just creating bad will. And I don't, like I guess you could. I don't. In my opinion, I'd rather protect my client 100% than 90%.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with that.
So that's so. Now the case that you're not going to take, guy called me the other day and he was like all fired up, talking about speedy trial and statute of limitations, and they were giving me a really hard time. Like, oh, slow down. The cop was giving you a hard. No, the judge. I was like, so you already went to court, and he basically tells me the judge was screaming at him, and he was yelling back at the judge, and he went to law school. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna wave this one off. I go, listen. Let me make some phone calls, see what's going on in your case, because most judges don't scream at people in court.
Yeah,
they don't. They're professional. And he goes, no local. He's like, no local. He goes, no local lawyer will take the case. I didn't know why. I'm thinking to myself, why? It's like, I go, well, I cover the entire state. I'll take anything.
Yeah.
So I said, calm down. Let me make some phone calls. Give me information, because I wanted to call the prosecutor, and I wanted to see, because apparently he was sit down for trial, and he's like, no, this is what I want. I want, I'm not going to do a plea bargain. I was like, listen, I don't think I'm the right lawyer for this case. Now, again, I would have represented him, but I had, look, if the guy wanted to pay you $400 an hour, I guess no one's going to want it. They're not going to want to pay you what that. You don't know what you're walking into. There's no way of you controlling the case where you have a client that's so angry and just wants you to go in ramrod. If they want to use me as a professional and understand that they're purchasing an inventory of intellectual property.
Yeah.
I could charge them a reason. I could charge them a very cost-effective fee and save them thousands of dollars. If they want to use me as a battering ram, if they want to direct me, I'll do anything you want me to do as long as it's not illegal, But they got to pay for that, because I don't know what they're going to tell me to do. I don't know what good offer they're going to turn down.
Yeah.
Prepping a trial is a lot of money. I charge flat fees almost 100% of the time. I charge flat fees. All right. So I know what I can, but I assume every now and then that flat fee I charge somebody, I lost money on. I assume that risk, but by charging a flat fee, they're giving me the authority to go to court without them, to make independent decisions on the case, and to act in their best interest. Every now and then I got to do a trial. I got to do massive motion practice. I'm happy to assume that risk, and whatnot, because overall, it works out well for me and my client. But if I know that I got an unreasonable client and he just wants one way and he's not going to let me finesse the case, he's not going to let me plea bargain it, he's not going to let me go there and be contrite and say, listen, he hired me now, he realizes what he did was wrong, let's work something out. And he's not willing to take an offer that I can get on the table, and whatnot, then I'll still do the case, but it's going to cost you $400 an hour. You're gonna have to come up with $12,000 up front, because I don't know how far you're leading me down this road. So they're not going to want to do that. So the guy I said, listen, I can't represent you cost effectively, and I'm willing to do some work for free. I'm willing to call the court. Not really. I was going to call the court. That would be improper. Call the prosecutor. Maybe call a local attorney or two that I knew, who are familiar with, a little more familiar with the judge than I was, do a little research, do a little investigation, sniff around, see if I can get this guy out of whatever trouble he got himself into. But he didn't want to hear it. I said, okay, look, I'll still represent you, but it's going to be $400 an hour. And then there's dead silence. You always get the dead silence after that. You want justice. Justice costs money. What do you want from me?
Expertise costs money.
Like, if you want me to sniff around, see what I could do, I give you a reasonable price, I can get you out of this. I think you don't really want to have to go back to that court. I can go to court for you. Look, I'm sure I could have got him out of it, but that's not what he wanted. And then I said, I don't really like to turn anyone down. You know what I mean? Like, because people like that really need good representation. And I feel I'm not here to judge people, but I certainly couldn't have done it. I certainly couldn't have done it at a flat fee with a guy that wasn't going to give me the authority to act on his behalf and was going to want to be ordering me around every step of the way. I couldn't do it. So I declined that case.
That's fair. I mean, some people, they're your own. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. I think it's definitely it's unfortunate. So, all right, I got one more thing here. I'm gonna have one more sponsor. I'm actually gonna have two sponsors because I'm gonna make you my final sponsor. So I'm gonna have you think about how you want to best present yourself to our audience and tell them where to find you in just a minute. Before I do that, let me cover our final sponsor, and that is Emergency Room Marketing. Emergencyroom.marketing. What's the first question if you're an injury attorney? What is the first question you ask your clients when they come to you and ask you for help? You say, have you been seen medically? Tell me the information about the case. Obviously, you want to know how long ago it happened. Because of this reason, injury attorneys oftentimes get the pejorative title as an ambulance chaser, right? Which, is a little bit unfair. There's a pool of people that you have to draw from who need your services. Those are a pool of people who've been injured. And if they've been injured, they've been to the emergency room. Emergencyroom.marketing has come up with a way to basically draw a satellite fence around all of the hospitals in your area. And they can actually target the people who go there using their mobile devices, which we all carry around on us at all times. And they can actually then follow those people. They can ping them and they can show them ads for your law firm for the next 30, 60, or 90 days. It's an amazing way. It's kind of like having a billboard, which you pay for on the roadsides all the time. Those can cost you $500 to $5,000 to $10,000 a month to have a roadside billboard. This is like having a billboard inside the emergency room. So visit our sponsor, emergencyroom.marketing. So not .com, not .co, emergencyroom.marketing. So that being the case, let me go ahead and switch this back over so we can see you again, Michael. And then before I give you the floor to give us an advertisement, I'll say two things. One of them, if there's anything else that we haven't covered that you think would really be something we should talk about, we should do that. But the other thing I want to mention, I know you have a couple websites. One of them is attackthatticket.com and one of them is mpalombolaw.com. So you can tell our people which ones are the best ones to find you. They can go to either. But when I went there, I saw this, very clean shaven attorney, and then when I met you yesterday, I saw this amazing beard. And so I have to ask, because it's a very impressive beard. Is that just a lifestyle decision or is that something where you decided that is that a COVID beard? And it looks great on you.
It's not a COVID beard. And what happened was I hadn't really grown up. I grew it like pre-COVID and hadn't grown a beard in a while. I used to kind of have beards and shave them off. But then as I started to go gray, it was like salt and pepper, and I really didn't like. Still a little salt and pepper. It's mostly white, and then I don't know. I don't know. It's pre-COVID. Let's say going on a year and a half, 2 years. I just didn't shave for a bunch of days. I was like, wait, it looks pretty good. I like the white. I like the white. I think I like the white. I usually keep it. But I was in the Navy, and I have a friend of mine, Bernard Martin, who's
Thank you for your service, by the way.
We've stayed in touch since the 80s. And his beard is in the Redneck Hall of Fame. He calls this really long beard, So what happened was I usually kind of keep it shorter, and then it was kind of growing in. I saw this Western, and this guy had a really nice thicker beard. I was like, let me try. I kind of like it like that. I was like, you know what? I like it a little thicker. I like it a little longer. And what happened was I started to build my YouTube channel, and this is like last August. I put like a video up. I put my first video up. I highlighted a case. I did a quorum nobis proceeding on, as I was talking about. It was a very difficult case, and it took me like 10 months to win, but I ended up winning it. And it was an interesting case. I highlighted this on my YouTube channel, and my cousin saw it, and he goes, "Oh, you look like Santa Claus," I'm like, what? I look like Santa Claus, I got my hair in a ponytail. I grew my hair out too for the hell of it. I never grew my hair long, and I just decided, let me see how. I'm going to cut the hair pretty soon. I really don't like it. You can't really see it, but it's just very thick. Doesn't really flow, but I'm gonna cut it soon. I just gotta get to the barber.
It's kind of like if Karl Marx and Steven Seagal had a baby.
Oh yeah, I'm like, you know what? I do look like Santa Claus, I'm like, and I was still kind of slow last year, I was like, I wonder if I wonder if there's any plays they need a Santa Claus. Like the Christmas
Yeah,
plays. Like episode of the Christmas show at Radio City. They got all these Santa Clauses in the background. So I
yeah,
started looking around for Santa Claus jobs in October in August, and I found Cherry Hill Photographies. The mall Santas.
yeah.
This is serious business. They want real bearded
Oh
Santas.
yeah, you don't want the kids pulling that fake beard off.
They'll fly to Alaska. They'll be like, hey, you don't got to do it in New York. You want to go to California for like 6 weeks? They need Santa Clauses all over the place. So I was like,
Huh.
no. So and it's not. You're not just sitting there Santa. I mean, they want you to be theatrical. They want you to be. And you can see I'm an outgoing guy, and if it's not my kid, I love the kid. Well, my kids aren't that small anymore, but they're in their 20s. But still, if it's not my kid, I love the kid. So and I did pass the background check.
There you go. There you go.
I got that going for me. Anyhow, but so then it was when I started growing it a little longer for the season. I just stopped shaving it, and now I'm in a competition with my friend Bernard Martin. See, we're getting together next month. We're having we have a reunion every May. So his is, you know what it is? I don't think mine grows as fast as his. His
Yeah.
just grows. You know what I mean?
Sometimes when they
So
get really long, they get straggly. Not everyone can pull off the ZZ Top. This is good and full. Like it's a good look.
I got beard shampoo. This guy it's called I can't remember it. And I got beard oil and stuff like that. No beard. I got beard shampoo. You got skin oil for underneath,
Yeah.
and then there's this waxy stuff where you can kind of it's a whole thing, man. So I was gonna trim it like right after the season. I was gonna trim it up a little bit, but I just kept it. But after this, I was actually thinking about shaving it for the hell of it, and I just kept it. I like it.
It looks good. I like it too.
It looks good. It's the Santa Claus look going.
I like it.
But well, anyhow, yeah, I think mpalombolaw.com. That's one of my websites. Who's going to remember that? Attackthatticket.com. You can find me anywhere. You Google my name, Michael Palumbo, New York traffic lawyer. I'm going to come right up. But attackthatticket.com. You're going to remember that. People, that's more memorable. I have a phone number. It's 877 90. Not the toll free number is 877 996 6849. But it's 877-99-NOTIX.
No ticks.
It corresponds no ticks. 877-99-NO-TICS. Attackthatticket.com. We answer the phone 24/7. I have numerous phone numbers. I got local phone numbers. I have a home office number. I'm home right now. I got the home office number. I might call you back on this number. This could imprint when I'm not here. All my numbers go over to an answering service English is their first language. It's an answering service in the United States. They're all college students, so you can leave a good message. People hate that when you can't quite leave a message.
Yep.
We call back right away. I mean, we return calls pretty much 24/7. Obviously, you call 3 a.m, you're not going to get a call back until like 9 a.m. But 8, 9 o'clock at night, probably going to call you back. When you contact our office, you're going to talk to me or another lawyer. It's always going to be a lawyer. I do have an office manager. She might pick up the phone. She can give you some good information too, but she really doesn't deal with the tickets that much. But you're going to, even if she does pick up the phone, you're going to have a lawyer on the phone before you know it. We're other than the office manager, we're all lawyers. So a lawyer is going to call you back, or if someone answers the phone, it's going to be a lawyer if it's not me. I'm very reachable. Email is mpalombolaw.com, attackthatticket.com at gmail.com, attackthatticketny at gmail. Again, it all hits to us. So we're very easy to get in touch with. You can call us on the weekends. We get back to people on the weekends. And we get back right away. We don't languish our phone calls.
Though he might be a little busy around Christmas time, it sounds like.
Well, I was slow this Christmas. I was slow, so it worked. It worked well, but they do work you for that 6 to 8 week period. I mean, you're working, but no, even then, I mean, my Santa shifts were from 11 to 8. I worked in the morning. You had an hour break, so I would, and I have a law partner and another attorney, so it's not like and any follow ups I needed to do, I just did during my break or 8 o'clock at night or early in the morning. We don't skip a beat. We don't skip a beat. If I go on vacation, if I take off, I'm on vacation. I'm always available.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter. My cases are always covered. We have per diem attorneys a lot of times that cover cases. Anyone in my office that handles your case at any degree is a professional criminal defense, and most importantly, does a high volume traffic ticket defense. So it's a very compact and very skilled law practice, and that's what you always. Again, I don't care what you want in the law. Get a lawyer that specializes in what you need. That's the most important thing you could do. And anytime you get hauled into a court, it could be a divorce, it could be a family court matter, it could be a traffic ticket, it could be a criminal matter. Before you do anything, if you're compelled to go into a court, contact a lawyer that understands what's going on first. Even if you think you want to represent yourself, don't do anything in court, because a lot of people, they start their cases, they blew their time with discovery and disclosure, they ticked off the judge, maybe not as bad as the one guy I was talking about, but still they annoyed the process, and now I got to untie the knot. And if you haven't done the groundwork, you're not going to get the leverage you need to get the best deal. Just the rule of thumb is, you're hauled into court, go find a lawyer before you do anything. Get a little knowledge that way.
That's awesome. That's great stuff. Well, listen, Michael, thank you so much for talking with me today. This has been one of the more enjoyable. I talked to a lot of attorneys, but this has been one of my favorite conversations in a good long while. Incredibly personable, great stories, great information, and everything else. Let me zoom out here so we can see each other a little bit better. But I just want to say thank you very much. And again, for all of our listeners, whether you're watching this on YouTube or any of the tube sites we have this on, whether you're listening to it, in the show notes, you will see information to all of our sponsors and also to Michael's site, attackthatticket.com, as well as all sorts of information to reach out to him. Thank you guys very much for listening to the Attorney Post. We will be posting more content on a regular basis now. We are back officially, and we're really excited to be here and to be talking with attorneys and bringing just insider talk on the law. So once again, Michael, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I really had a blast, and I'll leave you with the last word for our listeners.
The last word, Justin. Thank you for having me on, and I really appreciate what you're doing for the public to educate them about various areas of the law. And again, it's basically boring stuff, but when you need a lawyer, you need to know where to go, and your website is certainly a resource to have an understanding about that.
Well, I appreciate that.
Thank you for the service you're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michael. And I will follow up with you shortly after we end this here. But to everyone else listening, have a good one, and we'll see you soon.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.